Hello, good morning from New York. My name is Bart van Ark and I'm Chief Economist at the Conference Board, and welcome to our monthly series Window On, which this time is on Window on the Retail Apocalypse, which is quite a dramatic term for what is happening, but it is certainly true that there is a lot of disruptive forces in the retail sector, particularly from digitization, which are impacting both e-commerce but also brick and mortar stores and how they interact. And that's really the topic of today. It's an undeniable change in the lives of global consumers to see this increased ability to purchase goods and services without even setting a foot in a store. On one side of this omni-channel, there are e-commerce purveyors, some of the most innovative organizations in the whole business world. And on the other hand, there are in-store retailers who, according to one of our guests on the show today, still count air conditioning and escalators as the best innovations. And she's actually one of the more optimistic ones about the future of brick and mortar. So the goal of this program today is to discuss and consider how the process of selling goods is changing and what it means for the shape of the retail industry. The effect that it has on customer experience, its impact on suppliers and other retail value chain participants, and how the role of stores in general will change. So some of the key questions that you see on the slide here are, how quickly will in-store retail jobs disappear, and what types of jobs will they replace? What factors may cause the transition from brick and mortar to e-commerce to accelerate? And what strategy should retail firms, and particularly brick and mortar firms, adopt to provide more value to customers and successfully adapt to an omni-channel world. So some great topics, and what is even more important, we have some really great guests on our show today. And let me start with our two guests, which are virtual. They really sacrifice themselves because they're in different parts of the world than New York. We have Nikki Bears, who's Vice President of Retail Innovation at Aptos, and she's joining us today from Seattle, so it's a very early time for you, and thank you to be there fresh and bright this morning, Nikki.
Thanks for having me.
And then right at the other end of the world is Eva Nai, and Eva is the Vice President Retailers and Multinational Client Groups at Nielsen in China, and she is in Shanghai, so she is at 9 p.m. Or evening time and has a long time behind her, and you still look bright and fresh. It's great to have you on, Eva.
Thank you,
And
Bart.
then here in the studio, I am being joined by two of my colleagues. First of all, Steve Otland, our President and CEO at the Conference Board, but a previous career in the retail sector, particularly at AutoZone and
Office Depot.
And Office Depot, yes, I was trying to find her out. So a lot of retail experience, which is another reason to have you on here this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining. And then right at the other end of the table is Brian Shadkin, who basically is causing this webcast because he started off with this blog that we'll talk about in a minute, called the Retail Apocalypse. And we'll talk a little bit, Brian, about your views on this, and we have a great panel to challenge you on those views. It's going to be a great discussion.
Thank you, Bart.
Great. A few guidelines on the webcast, and then we'll move on. First of all, some of you may be joining this webcast for CPE credits, and you can do that by typing in your full name and email address in the space provided. You have to click free pop-ups that occur during the program. You have to stay online for the entire webcast, and the credit is, of course, only available if you are participating live. And then, of course, we want you to participate in this webcast as actively as possible, so you can ask questions, and you can do that by typing in questions throughout this webcast. Don't wait for a particular slot, just put them in, and we will weave them in our Q&A during this webcast. Feel free, there are a couple of slides from Brian's presentation. You can download those via the file download pod in the bottom center of your screen. You may full screen the video or PowerPoint at any time by clicking the four arrows, which are at the top right of your screen. And then at the end of the webcast, there is always an evaluation. It only takes you 1 or 2 minutes, but we always like to hear from you because it helps us how we can continue to improve this program. And finally, the program is available on demand about 48 hours after this time. You can share it with your colleagues, or even if you want to watch bits and pieces of it later on, you're of course welcome to do so. And that is all in terms of introduction. So let's start right away. And as this is an interactive webcast, we do start with a poll question. So you can right away answer a question that should be coming on right now, and it is. And the question is, to you, whether you think the current share of e-commerce in retail sales in the US is currently 9%. So it's up from 2.2% in 2005. Where do you think that share will be in 2040? Above 90%, above 50%, or less than 50%? So where do you think the share of e-commerce and retail sales in the United States will be in about 2040? More than 90%, above 50%, or less than 50%? And we'll keep it open for a little more, a couple of seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we're going to close it. Thank you. And the response is roughly that 2/3 of you are saying above 50%, but less than 90%, and 1/3 of you are saying it's less than 50%. Today, again, it's only 9%. So let me ask very quickly to the panel. I'm going to start with Nikki. In 30 seconds, what's your response? Are you surprised by this result? Are you disappointed? What is your first reaction?
I was rooting for less than 50%. I'm not surprised to see above 50%, and I'm not surprised that nobody selected above 90%. Sorry, Brian.
And Eva, the question is for the US, but maybe you can also quickly look at it from the perspective of China. Would the answer in China be different?
I think for China, actually I voted for above 50, and I think for China it will be more or less about 50. 90 will be a little bit too extreme, okay. I think.
And Steve, what's your first reaction?
Yeah, my view is things move very slowly in retail. I think 5 years ago people were saying that by now in 5 years everybody would be riding around in autonomous vehicles and not driving, and yet we're not there. So I think our aspirations on where things are going are probably ahead of reality.
Brian, you think it's more than 90, or at least you want to pose that position that it is more than 90.
That is correct. Yeah. 23 years can be a long time in retail. As recently as 2000, 10 times the number of CDs were sold as are sold today. So I think it's quite reasonable that in 2040, more than 90% of all purchases could be made online.
So let's pursue this a little, and then, of course, I'm going to ask the other participants to respond to this. So you wrote a blog about this a couple of weeks ago. It's on our website, and at the end of this deck, there's a reference to where you can download the blog. It's a great blog, by the way, and it's very provocative, but it's also well funded by numbers. And let's just talk through this for a couple of minutes, what your argument is. So first of all, in the blog, you separate between jobs that exist and existed in brick and mortar retail and jobs that are more e-commerce type jobs. So can you explain that distinction a little more?
So the brick and mortar jobs are those jobs that occur in stores and also other non-store retailing jobs, such as those who have vending machines and things like that. How does e-commerce change the way in which retail is conducted? It changes it in terms of transportation, particularly in delivery. So that's why the couriers and messengers industry is included. It changes it from a logistics perspective. So that's why jobs in warehousing and storage end up in this new e-commerce sector. And then finally, electronic shopping jobs, which of course can range from just people who are administering e-commerce sites, and also in some cases, jobs in those first two categories can be included in the third, depending on how BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics classifications operate.
All right, so take this distinction between old and new jobs, and in this slide, you're actually making a comparison about the trends so far. So explain a little bit how these trends have developed in this slide.
So this slide shows the number of jobs in each of these segments indexed to the end of 2007 equaling 100. And as you can see, the green line, which reflects private sector employment, has grown the fastest. It's about 8% above pre-recession levels. That's in comparison to the blue line, which is in-store retail, which is only about 1% above pre-recession levels. And even if you add in this new retail category and create this old and new retail employment line, the red line, you're still getting about only half the rate of growth that you're seeing across the economy as a whole. Right. And particularly you see a pause in 2016 and 2017. Yeah. And when you see a pause as a result of technology, as we saw in the late 90s in manufacturing, that's a bad sign during the next recession.
So this is interesting, right? Because so if I read this well, before the global financial crisis in the 1990s and 2000s, job growth in the retail sector was solid and actually even somewhat faster than private sector employment, and now it has begun to slow down. So what's been, it's actually interesting that even if you add old and new retail jobs together, it is growing more slowly than the private sector as a whole. So you think that's because of technology?
Absolutely. So if we look at the next slide, we could see that during this 2005 through 2017 period, the share of e-commerce and retail sales grew from around 2.3% to 9.1%, 6.8% increase.
Yeah, so
and that's approximately a quadrupling.
Yeah.
And so, and in addition to that, you saw a doubling between 2005 and 2011, another doubling between 2011 and 2017. So that trend is fairly consistent. So what does that result in the number of new retail jobs? It ends up that 749,000 in addition were created. So for every 1% of new retail growth, that creates about 110,000 jobs, whereas about 170,000 jobs are associated with each percentage of old retail jobs. So what does this mean if we take this quadrupling trend every 13 years out until 2040?
Yeah, so that's important. That's your assumption, right? You take the trend that we had, the quadrupling, forward out to 2040.
Right. And that's where we get this apocalypse is ongoing scenario, where that quadrupling continues. And as of May 2040, I want everyone on air to take this prediction 100% to the bank. That will be the date at which the last store will close, and there will be no more in-store retail jobs.
Okay.
So what would that mean if that were to come true from an employment perspective? Well, this blue line shows the growth over time in new retail jobs. You would
on the right-hand side, on the
about 12 million of them. Old retail would, of course, entirely disappear as of May 2040. And the result is, because there are more employees required for each percentage of old retail than new retail, a loss of around 5.5
So now
million
you are
jobs.
saying that this actually is not even the most extreme scenario. You think actually that e-commerce jobs may even grow faster because of some specific scenarios that we're discussing in this slide.
Absolutely. So there are a few reasons why I think that may be the case. First of all, there is a learning process that occurs as e-commerce is adapted to sell books. That learning process helps inform being able to sell groceries down the road. So that's those faster productivity gains. Innovative frontier firms are populous among e-tailers and e-commerce providers. And then I think downstream suppliers, and this is why I talk about network effects, gradually adapt themselves in a particular sector away from brick and mortar retailers towards providing e-tailers. And as a result, you sort of have this rapid tipping point effect where a particular sector can change very, very quickly from being a primarily store-based sector to one that's primarily
So these are
online.
arguments that actually this zero brick and mortar stores could arrive even before 2040. Now, just to be clear, I don't think you were arguing that it is literally absolutely zero, but it is going to be very small in terms of the number of physical stores that we still have. I think that's
correct. I mean, there will always be a novelty factor.
Right.
I mean, we've seen LPs continue to be a small segment of the music market. We will always have used bookstores in small towns.
These are scenarios, but it's less than 10%. That's I think your main point. So let's get the reaction from others on the panel very quickly. We'll have a little bit more time later on in the panel to talk about in more detail. And Nikki, let me start with you. Sort of in a minute, how do you respond to the scenario? Outrageous, impossible, or it seems to be reasonably built up by Brian.
Well, I think the challenge I have is that it assumes that stores as they exist today don't change and adapt to respond to the challenges that are coming from e-commerce. So I see a lot of retailers looking at changing their stores to be more event-driven and services-driven and delivering the kinds of things that you can't deliver online. As far as I can tell, you can't get a haircut online. You can't get your bike fixed online. So there's a lot of aspects to retail that retail supports these services that could potentially lead to a longer life for the store itself.
Eva, from your perspective, China is moving very, very quickly on e-commerce. So what's happening to the brick and mortar sector there? It's also coming from a very different space than where the US brick and mortar was coming from.
Yes, actually, we're seeing a rebound in brick and mortar in the past 18 months in China. As the brick and mortars are fighting back the e-tailers. And at the same time, the e-tailers, they're also starting to partner with the offline retailers as well to really drive the total consumer omnichannel experience. At the same time, we're also seeing the modernizing of stores within the lower trade, the grocery trades in the lower tier cities by the e-tailers as well. So in China, the retail industry might not be losing a lot of jobs, but in fact, in the lower tier cities, because of that, perhaps there might be more jobs created.
Okay. So Steve, you already mentioned that you're cautious on this because you've been seeing this happening very slowly. So you think Brian's speed is too fast?
Well, my compliments to Brian for writing a provocative piece, and I think he's come at it from a mathematical point of view. I think the notion of going to zero or near zero is probably unlikely, just because there's a lot of gravity to these things, and things move very slowly. One thing, though, that I think needs to be taken into account is the cost of labor. So one thing influencing the amount of labor is the cost of labor, and as we see the labor markets tighten up today, you see retailers doing whatever they can to take labor out of the stores and automate as much as possible. And that is a factor, I think, that argues in Brian's favor, regardless of what happens in the shift between e-tail and retail. But I think what you see is, to some of the other comments that were made, I think you see an evolution here. There are so many services, fuel, gasoline, services in stores that just cannot be delivered over the internet, that there is no way to get to zero. There's some floor in that. Further, there's actually some recent research that says that millennials are actually trending back. And I met with some CEOs of some mall-based retailers just in the past week who said mall traffic is picking up, and it's being driven by millennials who grew up with e-commerce and grew up with mobile and actually are rediscovering the malls as a place to shop.
Which goes to Nikki's point of the experience and Eva's point of seeing some uptick here in China also. Now, Brian, you deserve a quick response. We'll spend a bit more time on it, but this is, in 1 minute, a few things you want to respond to right away.
I think the key thing is 23 years is a long time. Who knows if there'll even be a need for gas stations 23 years down the road. But I think Nikki's point is extraordinarily well taken, which is that the in-store experience, I think Steve was getting at the same issue, is going to be massively different in 23 years as well. And we'll see if that's an experience that American consumers, Chinese consumers, and European consumers want to engage in 23 years down the road.
Good, very good. Okay, so let's now, we can do away with the slides now and go back to full screen so that our viewers can see all of us even more clearly. Let's now talk a little bit more about some of these key characteristics of the digital revolution and to what extent these are game changers in the industry. To what extent, is the future of digital in retail really a sort of an extrapolation of the past, which is basically it's just going to be even better and even faster? Or is the technology really going to completely reshape the way that goods and services are being brought to the consumer? So in other words, will this go beyond just better supply chain management and greater convenience in purchasing some types of goods? And is it really going to be, and Nikki, I think you were pointing a little bit at that in your comment, is it really going to be a complete different way that people are going to shop? So let's first ask the audience on that. So we put up another audience question. And the poll question to you here will be, which technological development may be the most disruptive in shaping the future of the retail industry? So which technological development may be the most disruptive in shaping the future of the retail industry? And we'll give you a little bit of time because these are complex answers. One is the increased stability of data analytics applications to extract insights from customer data and improve customer satisfaction. The second is advancements in artificial intelligence and robotics that will allow for better inventory management and order response and increased productivity. The third would be disintermediation of brick and mortar stores through direct producers to consumer selling. There could be other ones. You could think of others. If there are others, feel free to put them in the the box because we'd like to hear what these others are. Maybe you just don't know, and that's also possible because we're looking into the future. So we give you a little bit of time to think about it, and then Steve, I'm going to ask you first, looking a little bit back at your tenure at AutoZone and Office Depot, what were the digital technology changes then, and where do you think the technology is heading? So let's give it 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So more than 50% of you are actually picking the second one, and that is advancements in AI and robotics will lead to better inventory management, order response, and increased productivity. More than 50%. 30% of you say no, it's the increased ability of data analytics to extract insights from customer data, improve customer satisfaction, and then a few of you think that the disintermediation of brick and mortar stores is going to be an important one. So Steve, looking back and extrapolating forward, is it a straight line extrapolation, same kind of technologies, just better and faster, or are there real game changers here?
Yeah, well, certainly there are game changers here. The question is, whether it actually changes consumer behavior. It certainly changes how retailers manage. I've been involved with retail since the early 70s when I worked in grocery stores as a kid. I've run grocery stores, drug stores, convenience stores, auto parts stores, and office supply stores. Office Depot was the 4th largest internet retailer in the world when I ran it. Things have evolved over time here, but I think what you see still is a need to go to these stores. You go into a Sephora and you see these young women just, having an experience that cannot be duplicated online. I think that was one of the things mentioned before, the touching, the feeling. You go into an AutoZone or a Home Depot where DIYers, do-it-yourselfers are going in for advice. You can't duplicate that online. The immediacy of a need, a break-fix kind of a thing, or a replenishment from a grocery perspective or a drugstore perspective, cannot be replaced. So I think there's always going to be this convenience notion and a need as you go. But I think that we're going to try to take more and more out. One more thought. The pure e-tailers, like Amazon, are few and far between. Even Amazon now have established a bricks and mortar presence with the acquisition of Whole Foods, and they are opening up Amazon to go. But they are doing it in a new way with cashier-less stores, which further supports Brian's point that labor will come out of the retail stores. But I think we need to disaggregate the question of whether labor will come out versus will bricks and mortar go away. I don't think bricks and mortar will go away, but I do think labor will continue to come out.
Let's deep dive a little more, because you're giving some examples, replenishment, for example, if people need more parts and things like that. I mean, why would it not be possible to deliver that, very quickly now through, once we have drones and things like that? I mean, it's all sort of looking forward, but Brian has a point. It's 23 years out. When it comes to advice, you can get the advice on the internet. To be honest, most of the time, then when I try to do something in my house, I don't go to the store. I go to an internet YouTube video.
Where do you go? Where do you go when you fix your car?
Well, I don't fix my car, but I bring my car to the garage. But if I would, I could again find YouTube videos. That's my point.
No, but it's the same thing. I mean, you can find these things online, and they're very good quality. But people have the immediacy of a need to fix a car. Their car is down. It's a transportation device. They go to the store. So there has not been great penetration there. You can get makeup online too, but you see people in these Sephora stores getting makeover. In other words, the point was made earlier. This whole experiential thing is critically important. And Brian, you made this point too. I think what's happening is bricks and mortar retailers are evolving to become omni-retailers, omni-channel, and they're creating an experience which creates gravity. And so that's why you're seeing mall traffic pick back up. It's the experiential part of it.
Okay. So Eva, let's talk a little bit about China, because China is interesting because, there is in a sense not that much path dependency. I mean, China used to be an economy with a lot of small mom and pop stores, and supermarkets are a relatively recent phenomenon. And then, this e-commerce came in. So there was a bit of leapfrogging there, which is one of the reasons that China is moving so much faster there. So what are the sort of key trends in e-commerce, also linking back to these technologies that were asked in the poll question, that you think are critical when you think about the future of retail in China?
Yeah, I think actually e-commerce is developing, or the e-tailers are diversifying their focus. First of all, I think in the key cities where majority of the large brick and mortar stores are placed in, actually we're seeing more and more collaboration between the e-tailers with the offline retailers, mainly to provide technology innovation to enhance in-store shopping experience. So going back to the poll just now, actually both the first and the second answer is exactly what we're seeing the Chinese e-tailers they are providing to the industry. Not only providing more in-store, enhancing the consumer perspective, but also enhancing how the offline retailers they are operating their stores. So that's predominantly found in the more upper tier cities or where the traditional brick and mortars, large hyper and supermarkets are dominating. At the same time, in the lower tier cities, where traditional trades, the mom and pop stores, they are still like over millions in China. What we're seeing is e-tailers, they are also going aggressively in modernizing these traditional groceries through providing logistics and IT infrastructure to the store owners. So we're seeing a tale of two cities here in China.
Interesting. So you mentioned this issue of predictive analytics, right? Which obviously that's a big deal, and you mentioned that being imported in China too. That gives an insurmountable advantage for e-tailers over in-store retailers. You have a great knowledge about customer demand, customer behavior, the price they're willing to pay. So how do you see that predictive analytics playing out?
Yes, actually, this is definitely it's one of the prevalence we're seeing, and given the prevalence of omni-channel in China, where online retailers they're actually aggressively going offline, where we're seeing with the aim of driving the total consumer experience. So that's why we're seeing a lot of location-based analytics or location-based marketings are being adopted in the China market. So, for example, there are a couple of key examples like using location-based, trying to drive traffic in stores, as well as targeting loyalty, driving loyalty, as well as increasing the basket size. So definitely, while the e-tailers they have the wealth of the big data, this open collaboration with the offline retailers actually it's also enabling the offline retailers to enjoy the capability of the big data analytics. And all these is enabled through the popularity of mobile payment in China. So in China, actually, mobile payment is one of the most easiest or most commonly used type of payment in China, which actually have facilitated this the wealth of the big data that we're seeing in China.
Nikki, any comments from your side? Any thoughts around what are the most important game changers in e-commerce?
Yeah, I mean, I thought you kind of actually offered a bit of a devil's choice in the poll question, because I see a lot of interest in AI, but applying it towards customer intelligence and customer insights rather than for inventory optimization. So most of the retailers that I'm talking to these days, when they talk about the future of digital and what they can do with digital, they are very much focused on the customer experience. I think within e-commerce, it's very much challenging to deal with the logistics side of the equation. Amazon has really set the bar with 2-day fulfillment. And even though people pay a membership for that, most people seem to think that that's free in their minds. So for a lot of retailers, trying to accelerate their supply chain is costly, but it's almost more costly not to do that. So I think some of the assumptions around the growth of e-commerce are going to be challenged by, is the supply chain side of that really sustainable for retailers to deliver?
So one question I have is that the third one that was shown there is the disintermediation of retail, direct delivery from producers to consumers. Is that going to accelerate hugely in your view, Steve?
Well, it has to a certain extent, but I've run both sides, the suppliers and the retail sides. The suppliers still have to rely on many distribution points, including retailers, but also wholesalers and so forth. So there's a stress in there between the suppliers and the retailers. If they start to go around the retailers and direct to consumer, they then create a fracture with their customers. They view the retailers as their customers, and they're that much further from their end consumers. These things are an evolution, and I think Brian was making that point that these things evolve, and they can evolve quickly, but that would be a massive fracture. And because of the multiple supplier relationships in almost every category, it could just kill a supplier. So they have to be very careful, and they have not done that. They've done more of partnering directly with the retailers to affect greater online sales.
Brian, what do you think is holding, you're optimistic on these technologies, and I think the other participants are saying, well, but there's a lot of other things going on here. So what is holding up the speed by which this technology is working its way through the retail sector?
I think a key aspect is not so much the barrier of creating the technology, but instead developing the public confidence and the public trust to change the mode of sales. And I mean, the question becomes sort of, does the fact that China has younger consumers, is that going to mean that, is that a factor in helping e-payments to develop more quickly and helping certain types of innovations develop more quickly? Because there are ways we can conceive of providing all of these services that have been discussed. I mean, I'm thinking, for example, with Steve's example of a car breaking down on the side of a road, you could easily imagine a TaskRabbit-like platform where auto mechanics are sort of standing by, waiting for calls, ready to go with equipment to the site, not necessarily being based in a single location. Of course, there would be cases where you need the full facility of an auto repair shop. And the question is, at what point does that still become a store? And I think that's where sort of the semantic definition question becomes interesting in thinking about my scenario.
So I want to talk a little, we talked about technology and change on the supply side, but let's talk a little bit about the consumer themselves. And some of you already made a bit of a comment. Millennials, yeah, they may like the technology, but they actually do like to go out to the mall and just have fun together. But I'd like to sort of maybe again start with you, Eva. How does the consumer change? What is your perspective? It's an age issue, obviously a demographic issue here, but there can also be, it's just now that people are confronted with different ways that they can shop and get goods and services, their preferences may change over time. What are you seeing? Eva, yeah.
Yes, we do see a shift in the preference, but I guess in China, I think it's more, I would say, on a need base, or I would say it's in the more industry specific. For example, it's funny that we see, just to put an example, it's funny that we see baby products like diapers and infant formulas. Actually, the sales in online in China is like close to half of the category sales, right? So you can imagine, actually online it's the most important channel. But at the same time, mothers are telling us that actually they still want and they prefer to shop in specialty stores like, mom and pop stores, where actually they have experts there to teach them, to answer some of the kid questions about whether kids have any issues or whatsoever. So the experience as well as the the value add that a store owner can add to the mothers is definitely also very important. So we do think that, as long as there's a special needs that the consumers that they are looking for some help as well as some advice or professional advice, we do see that the value of visiting brick and mortar stores. So I think, again, depending on the needs.
Any other thoughts about how consumers are changing?
I think Eva's point about experience and the ability to consult experts is very important in conceiving about the future of the store. Steve, you made a similar point earlier in thinking about the opportunity for do-it-yourself in some of the establishments that you've run in the past. It's extraordinarily valuable being able to consult with an expert in the merchandise that you're dealing with. As a tennis player, I love the fact that when I go into a tennis shop, I can talk with someone about the types of strings that I'm interested in purchasing. And I think having that kind of expertise in some sectors, but not all, can be a critical element of the retail experience.
Yeah, just one comment. It's interesting, this generational thing is brought up all the time, and the assumption is that younger people are more technology savvy and that the penetration of e-commerce is higher among younger people. In fact, according to the National Retail Federation, that's not the case. It's surprisingly close in terms of the percentage of goods bought online by each of the age groups, and even people, the elderly, quote unquote, are engaged
Go there as much as the younger.
Just slightly. It's not even statistically different, which was a shock to me because you have this assumption there. So I think this is I think it's a reflection of the change in our daily lives and the ubiquity of technology in our daily lives.
Nikki, how do consumers change in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Steve said, that idea of experiences. I see it as well in the generational studies. Gen Z is now kind of in the crosshairs because they're old enough that we can ask them questions and get kind of, answers that make sense. They can take multiple choice kinds of quizzes. I think I think it comes down to experiences. I think that for the things where there's not going to be a high value experience to be had, then sure, that stuff's going to shift online. I don't need to spend a lot of time in consideration of toilet paper once I've chosen my brand. I don't mind if that just shows up as a box regularly on my doorstep and I'm not actively involved or engaged in how that product comes to me or which product it is once I've made a selection. But, I was thinking about it when you were asking the question of, do brands disintermediate retailers? And I buy pet food from Petco and they deliver it to my house. I don't go to a store for that, but I never think about, well, I could just buy this from Iams or Blue Mountain directly. I don't think about it that way because, but I can also throw in some toys and, I have a cat and I also need some cat litter this time. And right. So I think the idea of behavior changing to the point where you sort of question the foundations of retail, I don't think we're going to get to that point because it would be kind of a pain if I buy Blue Mountain for my dog food to have to go to them. Right. And then if I have to go to Iams for my cat food, right? Like even if I'm just opening tabs on a browser, that's still taking time and mental consideration on my part, cognitive load that I don't want to spend. So I think, retail exists to help alleviate that cognitive load of buying things.
Yeah, and actually this age point is quite interesting because we did some work on connected spenders together with Nielsen in our Consumer Dynamics Institute, and we found the same thing indeed, that connected spenders, which are people who are out there online shopping broadly, the percentages aren't very different between age groups. So it's very much confirmed in some other work we're looking at. Now, this is a great transition to sort of our next block, and that is indeed, let's go back to those brick and mortar firms and what should they do in order to provide more value to their customers and how they're going to sort of successfully adjust to this omni-channel world, right? It's probably not one or the other. It's probably how you're going to adopt that omni-channel world and how you're going to operate as a brick and mortar store in that environment. So again, I think we want to start with a poll question here to put up because the question to the audience would be here, let's ask you, why do you think that consumers actually still want to go to a brick and mortar store? And that question is going to come up now. My colleagues are putting it up right now. So there are different reasons why consumers may go to a brick and mortar store. An opportunity to consult with merchandise experts, which was mentioned earlier. The convenience of being able to walk out with merchandise. Setting for touching and feeling merchandise, which you still can do on the internet. An ability to enjoy public space and special events. That was the mall point that Steve was making earlier. Consumers are already tiring of stores and would spend even less time in them if they could. So that's the negative answer. And then, there may be some of you who cannot even think of any reason why you actually want to be in a brick and mortar store. So take your time a little bit, and then again, lots of complex answers, and then Steve will carry on a little bit with a question. Why the retail sector remains the dominant form of commerce in the U.S. and even though Amazon was founded more than 20 years ago, right? So you wonder why that is happening. So let's wait for the answers. There's actually a clear majority emerging here. So let's see if that's still the case. And then we're going to close this in a few seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So very clear majority. More than 3/4 of you are saying the store is going to be there if people want to touch and feel the stuff. Another 19% are saying, well, it's the convenience of just being able to walk out of a store with all your stuff. And really not a lot of other reasons for that. So it's kind of interesting because I would say, okay, the touch and feel, if I buy a new shirt, I just buy it on the internet and I touch and feel, I don't like it, I send it back from UPS or any other. So I wonder why I would not go to a store for that. But anyway, we'll talk about it a little bit more and I'll let you respond on that. But Steve, let's first look back a little bit because you're right. I mean, Amazon is there for more than 20 years and still it's not the biggest player when it comes to the overall retail sales. I don't know exactly the percentage of Amazon or altogether, but Brian made the point earlier, it's 9% only together. So you really begin to think about how does that relationship between e-commerce and the brick and mortar stores going to evolve over time?
Yeah, well, so, look, just some numbers just to fill in. So retail in the U.S., and Eva will talk about China and other, but in the U.S., retail is about a $5 trillion industry, and e-commerce is, as Brian says, about 9 or 10%, depending on the latest numbers. Now, Amazon has 40% of the market share of all online commerce, but only 4% of total retail after this amount of time. So everybody says Amazon has killed everybody, they are the only ones that exist.
40% of e-commerce and 4% of overall retail.
4% of overall. So 90% of all retail is still done in bricks and mortar. Now, there's a lot of noise in that because a lot of retailers are going bankrupt because they deleverage very quickly and they've got their balance sheets are out of whack. But I think we've now settled in. I look at these reasons. So the National Retail Federation says that 56% of the people go shop in store because they want to see and touch it. 55% because they want to try on for fit. There's all these product things. The need for immediate delivery is over a third. Shipping cost and returns process is another thing. So there are a lot of reasons that still stand in the way. That's before you get to Eva's point and Nikki's point on the whole experiential thing, which it still is. People can't sit in their little apartments forever. They got to go out. They want to go out. Entertainment is shopping for a lot of people, and the experience is important. So I think there's a lot of reasons here.
So Nikki, when I go back to my shirt example. When I buy a shirt, I don't go to the store because they never have my size, which is probably my problem. Whereas when I go online, I can exactly find my size. So to me, it's a typical example. It goes against the 75% here of people who want to touch and feel. I don't want to touch and feel. I know what I want, and I can find most of the offerings on the internet. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that I wish people would ask that question a little bit differently, because I think what consumers are really trying to say there is that they want the inspiration of seeing the products in an environment that's different than their own. So, if you are looking for, I want to be on trend and I want the latest styles, then you want to go to a store to have the experience of seeing these products, suggested to you in ways that you can wear them. And the online experience there, especially with clothing, can be kind of cold. It's one shirt on a white background, and there might be a couple images of a couple people wearing that shirt, but that's not you and that's not your fit, and that might not be your style. And I think that's sort of the role that stores can play, especially when you couple them with employees who are trained and friendly and on trend themselves, who can say, well, you should try this shirt with this coat, with this tie. You should try this shirt, in this setting with these jeans. Have you tried untuck? You should look at untucking your shirt instead, right? Like all of those kinds of questions and experience and trade-off that you would get from a personal experience that you would not be able to really deliver that.
And that is exactly, we get some good comments also online. Somebody saying consumers are increasingly looking for personalization. Online through data analytics offers that, and it will grow. So it may grow over time, but at the moment that is still what you primarily find in the store. I'm probably just a boring shopper and not representative of the overall shopping community. But let's move a little bit to what you think brick and mortar shops should do, because e-commerce is going to be there, the omni-channel environment is going to be there. Where do you think brick and mortar shops should go in order to be able to survive in that future?
Yeah, I think that the way that brick and mortar is designed today, it's primarily a mechanism for delivering products to consumers where they walk in the store and it's on the shelf. And I think where they need to go is they need to be much more than just a product delivery mechanism. So that's where services, experiences, events, pickup, so using the store as a distribution center, using it as your local presence in that community, so that the store is not just a big box with a brand name on the front of it, but really actually a participant in the local community. I think all of those are ways that stores will need to change in order to continue their relevance in the future. And yeah, it means there's kind of a de-emphasis of actually selling products. Maybe a lot more of that activity will happen online before a consumer actually gets to a store, or maybe a consumer establishes a relationship with a retailer and their brand and then goes home and buys all that stuff online. It doesn't matter. It still has to play a role in connecting to consumers in a way that you can't deliver
Can
that
the brick and
connection
mortar
online.
store be sure that they will get the business? So people come to their store, they touch and feel and go home and buy it. How do they make sure that they're gonna still buy it with you rather than with the competitor who maybe offer it for less money?
Yeah, and I think that's where that connection or the services or the if you buy it, we'll tailor it. If you lose a button, then you can come in and get that fixed, or you can send it to me and I can fix it. But in sending it to me, you might be sending it actually to my local store, and there might be a tailor there who's fixing it. I think there's lots of ways where centralization doesn't necessarily benefit the retailer in their ability to serve the consumer, and that's where the store really becomes the front line of that relationship.
Steve, how do these brick and mortar stores react to this new world of e-commerce, and what should I do most foremost?
Yeah, well, first of all, I do want to mention you're not the typical consumer.
Okay.
Men don't buy. 80% of consumption in retail is women, and there are differences in how men and women buy.
Yeah.
I was talking with Abercrombie and Fitch, and they have now, it's an apparel firm, they're global, they have now a third of their sales online. But interestingly, what's happening is their online sales are coming to in-store pickup, to Nikki's point. And if you look at the aggregate of what online sales are, people typing at the computer and using web browsers and so forth is very, very small in the growth. It's now become, these handheld devices. And the irony of it is these handheld devices are being used while people are standing in the stores. And it comes, so there's been a lot of study on this. Why? What's going on that so they're checking prices in the stores. They're checking inventory. If they don't have a size, they like the quality, they like the feel, as Nikki was saying, they go online, they order it from the same store while they're standing in the store. So all the growth right now is on mobile. Big difference.
So you need to make sure that if people come to your store to touch and feel, that they're gonna buy with you and not with your competitor.
Right, and and so this whole notion of omni-channel, meaning all channels connected together in one fashion, in one business model, is critically important. And yet, only about half of all retailers globally are considering themselves or approaching the market that way. That's going to be, I think, the biggest change over the next 23 years is the move to, complete omni-channel.
Right. Brian, let's talk a little bit about real estate, because we talked about what are these stores doing, but the other question is where are they going to be, right? And how does that differ from the present distribution of physical locations for stores? You thought a little bit about that topic.
So I think the key thing is realizing that our present distribution of stores in the U.S. reflects a previous transportation and shopping mode paradigm. One where the primary way of getting to stores was through automobiles, and therefore it made sense to locate stores with easy highway access and oceans of parking spaces. And I think that's going to change in order to bring about the type of experiences that Nikki, Steve, and Eva are describing. You're looking at more showroom stores, and we've seen a lot of that happening in New York, where companies will have stores not primarily for the purpose of actually selling merchandise, but instead of giving people the exact experience that they described on the poll question, the ability to touch and feel merchandise. So that creates value in sort of center city locations, especially cities where tourists frequent those areas a great deal. But it does lower the value of existing storefront real estate. We've seen this in terms of malls. We've seen this even in my Upper East Side neighborhood. I can't tell you the number of lots that have remained vacant for a long period of time. And the question is there a path for using this existing real estate so that the value doesn't fall? Warehouses make sense in many cases in mall spaces just because you have sort of these cavernous indoors type spaces. I can imagine many of them being used for gyms. Right. Restaurants are a sector that are continuing to grow, but how much can people eat in? The question is, given that this real estate exists, given that firms have long-term leases and ownership in many cases of real estate that doesn't favor the creation of these new store experiences, how is this transition going to happen?
Yeah, I think the real estate's being impacted by a large extent by the weak and the strong retailers. The A malls are doing very well. The B and C malls are falling off. The strip malls, power strips as they call them, are doing well. The weak ones are falling off. But I want to come back to this point because it's related to real estate, which is this drones. I was talking with Jeff Bezos, who is the founder of Amazon, and I said, Jeff, explain these drones to me. And he said, look, I said, they don't make any sense in rural areas where you've got farms that are 20 miles apart. He goes, no, of course not. I said, and you can't fly drones in New York City. And he goes, no, you can't do it in dense urban areas. So you can't do it in any urban area, and you can't do it in rural area. Where can you do it? He said, it's basically ring areas of suburbia. So I said, why are you doing it? He said, well, we're fighting the supply chain costs and the dominance of FedEx and UPS, and we're trying to keep everybody on it. So there's a lot of strategies at play here, and the technology is the cool side, but don't look for drones everywhere.
Yeah, but again, we're talking out to 2040, so we know how the world looks like that. Nikki, any comments from your side on the real estate question around retail?
Yeah, I think that that old model of 99-year leases or owning the property outright, I think retailers are moving away from that very hard, and I see a lot more interest in flex locations. So, all of these empty places have the potential for life from a more temporary perspective. So, if you think about Halloween stores, they've kind of perfected the art, right? They open up in these empty spaces just for Halloween, and then when that's over, they close up shop and they go back home, and you don't see them again. But I think that particular activity is no longer limited to these really highly seasonal items. We're seeing more and more Instagram brands are taking it to physical locations by opening pop-ups. We're seeing, Macy's and Neiman Marcus are kind of wiping out some of the ground floors of their stores and putting in these marketplaces where they're offering opportunities for smaller brands to bring in product and kind of connect with consumers in a format that those brands would never be able to afford to build out themselves. So this idea of flex space, pop-up space, I think that's very much the future of retail from a real estate perspective.
Even let's go a little bit to China. Very early on, you mentioned that actually the share of brick and mortar stores is actually going up a little bit. And I think you were referring to second-tier cities in particular where this is becoming more important. So what do you see happening in China when it comes to the role of brick and mortar stores in the greater framework?
I think in that sense, it's very similar to what we've been discussing. So I'm hearing that there's one extreme is a lot of the stores need to become showroom stores, or pop-up stores. And that's exactly what we're seeing in China as well. So for the key brick and mortar retailers, what they are trying to do is they need to create reasons for consumers to making the trip there, right? So and the consumers will turn that into a social event, right? Gathering with friends, checking out new things in the stores. So definitely we're seeing a lot more focus or effort is put behind creating the in-store environment that attracts traffic in stores. So that's one extreme. While on the other hand, we are still also seeing more and more proximity stores popping up. Really, stores that really just meets the urgent or impulsive needs. So that's why we're seeing in China, these are the two new trends that we're seeing. And the retailers are also aggressively driving these technology as well as the in-store experience in particular through the adoptions of the technology. And as Steve also talked about closing the sales loop, and that's exactly what we're seeing in China as well. Again, using mobile phone, how the retailers, they are actually closing the sales loop. It's also something we're seeing, in particular, leveraging the apps that the consumers have installed into their mobile phone. Most often, promotions are being pushed when they're in stores. So trying to ensure that the consumers, when they're in stores, they check out the product as well as they also purchase it on their way out.
One point to make is that government regulation and taxes do matter here. So when I tried to enter India, it's a nation of shopkeepers. The government protected those markets. I couldn't come in as a multinational retailer, so I went direct and introduced an e-commerce business. And it was the same thing in China, that the government drove the rents up so high for external players that it just wasn't possible. So these things play. Another thing I'll point out is the sales tax thing. We're waiting a Supreme Court decision here in the United States, which should happen either tomorrow or Monday, related to equilibration of the sales tax. Online retailers up to this point have not had to collect sales tax. Bricks and mortar retailers have. It's created up to an 8% delta on the total price. And so a lot of the move to Amazon and the early seeding of these e-tailers has been because of the huge price differential. And it's been driving bricks and mortar retailers out. If they equilibrate that, that's going to have an impact on these trends as well.
Right. We have to begin to wrap up, but I want to raise maybe 2 minutes. One of you may want to comment on that. That's the question of talent. So it feels to me like, there is not a lot of thinking around talent skills and talent requirements in retail. It's like, it's cheap, it's low wage, you don't need to have a lot of skills and things like that. When I hear you guys talking about how this is going to change and how this is becoming more experience, a base, and everything else, yes, you may need some data analysts, but it seems there is a much broader question around talent in the retail sector. Any one of you, maybe start with Nikki or Eva, who want to comment on that?
Oh my gosh, I'm very passionate about this topic. I think that for retail to survive, the retail sales associate that you find in the store today I agree. I think there's going to be fewer of them, but I think that those jobs are going to be better jobs because there's going to be training. They're going to be higher skilled jobs. You have to be a problem solver, right? You have to be able to, as a consumer comes in the store, access the whole of the enterprise instead of forcing a consumer, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just a store employee. I can't solve this problem for you. You have to go home and call the call center in order to get that solved. Like those kinds of statements are the kinds of statements that retailers have to eliminate. And it means that the store employee has to become a much more high skill, high function employee in terms of how they serve the customer. So I fingers crossed that retailers make the transition. They are so entrenched in a model that is dependent on high turnover, low skill, low training, low pay, that trying to make that transition, I think, is going to be difficult. But I think it's going to be really important because it's not just about putting the products on the shelf and then watching them walk out the door with the consumer. You've got to offer a lot more in the terms of
Eva,
services.
you seem to be nodding yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's what we're seeing already in China.
Yeah, great. Okay. We need to wrap up. I'm going to ask each of you a final question. It's always a fun question at the end. And the question this time is what your boldest prediction is about the retail landscape during the next 2 decades. Something that you think is bold but might very well happen. Brian already made a bold statement, but I'll let you make another one. Steve, I'm going to start with you. What is sort of the boldest thing that you might see happen over the next 2 decades?
Well, I actually think there's going to be a resurgence of bricks and mortar retailers because of the omni-channel move, and fewer than half of them have any experience with it. As they become better at it, I think you're going to see an integration of their online experience, their mobile experience, and their in-store experience, such that the bricks and mortar, as we think about it today, which means a physical presence, will resurge. I think, though, that every store will be smaller because they will be pickup places rather than these massive halls of commerce. So I do think, though, that the number of locations and the presence in bricks and mortar may actually expand.
Great. Nikki, what was your boldest one?
Well, Steve took mine, so I'll add on to that. I think that stores are going to be fun, and Bart, even you will want to go there.
That is really bold. That is actually really bold. Eva, what's your boldest statement?
I'll build on Stephen and Nikki. I think not only that, whoever works there, I think they will be the expert. So no longer they're salespeople, but they will be the expert in that industry, in everything that has to do with the product that they're selling, because that's the only reason why shoppers will visit their stores.
Okay. And Brian, I mean, you're not going to backtrack from your more than 90% statement, but what's your boldest view if you look at all this?
For my 2040 scenario to come true, it's going to depend on customer trust. There's a gap between concerns about data privacy in the US and Europe relative to China, and that retards the ability of better mobile payment systems to be developed, better promotion systems to be developed. So that's one aspect. Trust in new modes of transportation. Not necessarily drones, Steve, but autonomous vehicles and autonomous trucking is a key element of any scenario where above 90% of e-commerce takes place online.
Great. Okay, let's go back to the slide screen. This was a great discussion. Thank you so much. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting stuff, and I'm sure we could spend another hour. Nikki and Eva, Steve, thanks a lot. Brian, for being so provocative. It really got us going. And I'm sure that some people will sign up to your statement. As I said, we'd like to hear from you, so please give us some feedback on this webcast. We're going to be back with a window on next month. It will be again on the trade disputes. We'll be looking back at that. We talked about it a couple of months ago, but as you know and follow the news, there's something happening every day at the moment, so we think there's another program for that. And then finally, there are a couple of resources at the conference board, including, I think, Brian's piece or somewhere else in the slides to download, and some other webcasts that you can attend. Thank you for joining a window on retail apocalypse this time. Next month, window on trade. Thanks again to the speakers. Thanks to the team. And I wish you a great day. My name is Bart van Ark, Chief Economist at the conference.